My son, Dorian, invited me to a Harvest Day dinner with promises of reconciliation. I arrived with cautious hope, only to find a room full of attorneys armed with documents to seize my company. Their smug expressions practically shouted victory. But I just laughed. "You're too late," I said, the weight of betrayal lifting off me like old armor falling to the ground. My revenge had already begun to unfold. But the road that led me there? That was a battle I hadn't seen coming. The office smelled of stale coffee and varnished oak, a scent that had always comforted me, like an old coat worn thin from years of use. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking beneath me, eyes fixed on the glowing spreadsheet on my screen. Figures scrolled by, shipments, routes, profit margins, all proof of the empire I had built with my freight company. At 68, I was tired. Yes, but I was also proud. A framed photo on my desk caught my eye. Dorian at age 7, grinning with a gap in his front teeth, dirt on his knees from racing through the backyard. That boy used to run to me like I was a hero. I smiled, but the ache behind that smile lingered. The door burst open without a knock, slicing through the quiet. Dorian strode in, the click of his shoes echoing on the hardwood. Behind him came Celeste, lips pressed into a tight line, clutching a manila folder like it might bite her. My heart lifted, just for a moment. My son, here unannounced. Maybe we were finally going to talk like men. Then the folder landed on my desk with a dull thud. Papers spilled across the surface like unwanted confetti. I knew instantly this wasn't a reunion. "Dad," Dorian began, his tone sharp and mechanical, "we need to talk about the company." I sat straighter. That familiar ache in my chest started tightening. "What's this about?" I asked, eyes flicking to Celeste. She had taken position by the window, arms crossed, her satin blouse shimmering under the desk lamp. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Dorian paced slowly, fingertips grazing the edge of the desk, lingering on the crystal award I'd won the previous winter. "You're holding us back," he said. "The company's stuck in the past. It needs new energy, fresh thinking." He stopped and turned toward me, his jaw clenched. "It needs me." I blinked. His words landed heavy. "You think I'm, what?" "Outdated?" I asked, voice calm despite my fists clenched out of sight. Celeste spoke next, her tone like frost settling on glass. "Malcolm, this isn't personal. We want what's best for the company. Forward-thinking leadership. Smarter strategies." She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. I glanced at the photo of young Dorian again. The frame's glass had a faint spiderweb crack. I hadn't noticed that before. "Modern," I repeated, tasting the word like it was sour. "Or just convenient for the two of you?" Dorian's eyes narrowed. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. Sign the papers. Step aside. Retire. You've done enough." He nudged the folder closer, his fingertips brushing the corner like he already owned it. The room felt like it was shrinking, the air thickening. I remembered teaching him to drive a pallet loader in the back warehouse, his laughter bouncing off steel crates. And now here he was dismantling everything I'd built. My pulse hammered in my ears, but I kept my voice measured. "I built this company from nothing. It's mine. You don't just walk in and take it." Celeste laughed, short and cutting. "Oh, Malcolm, you're sentimental. It's sweet in a way, but not realistic." She stepped forward, her heels tapping out a slow, steady beat on the floor. "You should be thinking about the future. Our future." Dorian leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "You're making a mistake, Dad. If you won't cooperate, we'll do this without you." He straightened and adjusted his tie, his face a mask. My throat burned, but I forced a smile. "You're welcome to try." The words scraped out like gravel, but they held. Celeste's eyes sparkled. Calculating. "You'll regret this," she said softly, turning on her heel. Dorian followed without another word. The folder lay sprawled across my desk like a gauntlet. The door clicked shut. Silence rushed in. I sat still, eyes locked on the old photo. My fingers brushed the cracked glass. The wall clock ticked a quiet, steady metronome counting down to something I didn't yet understand. I reached for my phone. My thumb hovered over a number, someone I hadn't called in years. But I stopped. Not yet. Instead, I stood slowly, my knees stiff from too many late nights. I pulled on my coat. The office lights flickered as I stepped into the hall. Beyond the windows, the skyline of 𝒆𝒅 shimmered in the haze, a jagged silhouette against the early dusk. Whatever Dorian was planning, I'd face it. But first, I needed to think. The only sound in the car was the hum of the engine as I drove through the quiet suburbs of 𝒆𝒅. Street lamps stretched long shadows over the dashboard. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The leather was cold beneath my palms. His words echoed. My way. I couldn't shake the image of that same boy, all those years ago, wobbling on a bicycle as I ran beside him. Where had that child gone? The city blurred by in streaks of gold and gray, and the ache settled in me like the autumn chill. Across town, in their new place on Elven Hill, Dorian and Celeste were already setting their trap. Their home gleamed with ostentation, crystal chandeliers, polished marble, but no soul, no warmth. Dorian stood by the brass bar cart, pouring a glass of whiskey. His phone pressed to his ear. Yeah, he said, his voice clipped and calculated. Tell them Malcolm's slipping. Too old. Out of sync. We need fresh blood. He hung up and smirked. Celeste sat curled on a velvet sofa, scrolling through her phone, not even looking up. He didn't budge, Dorian said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Thinks he's untouchable. Celeste didn't look up. He's stubborn, not invincible. We'll make him see the bigger picture. Her fingers paused over her phone, then danced across the screen. Meeting Laurel tomorrow. She'll circulate the word. Malcolm's losing his grip. Her lips curved, cold and deliberate. Dorian snorted. Good. Let's see how long he lasts once his golden image starts to crack. Back in the city, I sat alone in a corner booth at Noble and Nth, Hearth, a cafe where the scent of roasted beans mingled with the soft rustle of paper and quiet conversation. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, catching the steam rising from my untouched cup. Thomas, an old friend and once a reliable supplier, slid into the seat across from me, a troubled crease lining his forehead. Malcolm, what's going on? He asked, leaning in. I'm hearing things. People saying you're slipping, that the company's floundering. I froze, the coffee halfway to my lips. Who's saying that? My voice was steady, but my pulse wasn't. He shrugged, unease in his eyes. It's just murmurs. Clients. Competitors. You know how quickly things spread. He hesitated before adding, is it true you're stepping down? I set the cup down too hard. The ceramic clicked against the saucer. No, I said firmly, meeting his eyes. Let them talk. But the words felt weightless. Dorian's ultimatum. Celeste's smile. They'd already begun poisoning the ground I'd spent decades tending. That night, I pulled into my driveway. The house stood quiet, the porch light flickering like a weak pulse. Inside, I dropped my keys onto the counter and sifted through the mail. Bills, flyers, catalogs, then a crisp envelope. Thick paper, formal print. Trouble. The return address, Baywell and Amp, Carrick, LLP. My stomach twisted as I tore it open. The paper felt cold, the contents colder. Notice of intent. I sank into a chair. The letter trembled in my hands. Outside, the wind caught the leaves, sending them spinning to the ground like warnings. They weren't bluffing. This was their first strike. I folded the letter slowly, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the darkened window. They thought they had me surrounded. They were wrong. Rain streaked the office windows the next morning, turning the 𝒆𝒅 skyline into a smudged gray watercolor. I sat behind my desk, the letter from Dorian's legal team spread open. Words like negligence and mismanagement jumped off the page. Each accusation twisted deeper than the last. My fingers traced the edge of the paper, trying to ground myself as my thoughts spiraled. Dorian, my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike. To shake hands with confidence. To never give up. Now he was coming for the company I built. The phone rang. A client's name lit the screen. I answered. Hey, Reese. What's going on? His voice was stiff, detached. By the time the call ended, my hand shook. Another contract lost. The third this week. I drove across town to the Steerhouse, a familiar place where the scent of grilled meat and the soft clink of silverware usually grounded me. Reese was already there, seated at a high-top table, his tie loosened. I slid into the seat opposite, searching for any kind of explanation. "Malcolm," he said, not looking at me, "we're transferring our account." He stabbed at his steak. The metallic scrape of his fork grated. "It's nothing personal, just business." "After 12 years?" My voice cracked, despite my effort to stay composed. "Reese, what's happening?" He shrugged. "We need someone hungrier, more aggressive." The word struck like a blow. I knew exactly who'd fed him that line. Back at the office, I paced as rain pounded the windows harder now, like it was warning me. I couldn't lose everything. Not like this. On instinct, I grabbed the letter and drove to a brick building nestled between two aging brownstones downtown. The address belonged to a legal firm I'd never contacted before. The sign read, Marshall and Anth, Lane, Attorneys at Law. I pushed the door open. The smell of old paper and lemon polish greeted me. Behind a large wooden desk stood Ellen Marshall, her silver hair tied back in a knot, her presence steady and sharp. "Mr. Crow," she said, extending a hand. "I've reviewed the letter. Your son's not playing fair." I sank into a worn leather chair. The exhaustion of the past few days settled on my shoulders like a second coat. "I don't want a war," I said quietly, "but I can't let him take what I built." She leaned forward, her pen tapping a legal pad. "He's counting on that hesitation," she said. "He thinks you'll fold. We won't let that happen." Her confidence steadied me, but doubts still circled like vultures. Could I really fight my own son? Elsewhere in the city, in a sterile, modern dining room glowing with chrome and glass, Dorian and Celeste clinked their champagne flutes. "He's unraveling," Dorian said, his grin wide. "A few more nudges, and the whole thing's ours." Celeste took a measured sip, her gaze narrowing. "Don't underestimate him. He's not as weak as you think." That night, back at my office, I sat alone under the flickering fluorescent light. The numbers didn't lie. Clients lost. Contracts dissolved. Revenue shrinking. My fingers drifted across the edge of an old photo, our very first delivery truck, parked outside the tiny warehouse I'd leased with the last of my savings. I had built this company from scratch, brick by brick, day by day, and I wasn't done. Not yet. I stood slowly, the photo still in hand, and whispered into the silence of the room, "This isn't over." Outside, the rain finally eased, and I felt something stir, faint but unmistakable. A spark. Dorian thought he'd won the first round. He had no idea what was coming. The living room was silent, except for the subtle creak of my armchair as I shifted. A photo album rested in my lap, its leather cover worn smooth over the years. I stared at one image in particular, taken during a long-forgotten summer. Dorian, maybe 5 or 6, his cheeks sticky with watermelon juice, laughter frozen mid-chase as he reached for a firefly just beyond his grasp. I could still hear that laugh, high and bright, the kind that once made my chest swell with pride. Now, that same ache was sharp and hollow. I traced the photo's edge with my fingertip. The paper felt cool. The memories pulled me back. I'd started the company with nothing but a dented truck and a refusal to quit. I'd spent nights hunched over route maps at the kitchen table while Dorian slept in the next room. His tuition, his first car, every dream he ever chased, I'd funded it with sweat and sacrifice. I was the one who gave him his first job, watched his face light up as he learned the ropes. "I want to be like you, Dad," he'd said once. I believed him. The album suddenly felt heavier in my hands. I flipped the page and landed on a photo from our company's 10th anniversary. Dorian in an oversized blazer, standing next to me, grinning like the world was his. When had he stopped looking at me like that? I shut the album. The snap echoed in the empty house. I stood, my knees groaning in protest, and stepped outside. The park nearby was a quilt of fallen leaves. Their rustle beneath my boots blended with the distant laughter of children. I walked the gravel path, hands buried in my coat pockets. The chill in the November air bit at my knuckles. A family passed me on the path. A father carried his daughter on his shoulders, her delighted shrieks cutting through the twilight. I looked away. I could still remember the feeling of Dorian on my own shoulders, lighter than air, arms outstretched as if he could fly. Had I missed something? Some critical moment when he turned? My phone buzzed in my pocket, jolting me back. It was Pete, one of the warehouse managers. He'd been with me since the early days. "Boss," he said, voice low. "There's talk. Dorian's telling folks you're stepping down. Some of the team's getting nervous." I stopped walking. The air left my lungs. "He's wrong, Pete," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You know that, right?" "Damn right I do," Pete replied. "Just thought you should hear it from me." The call ended. I stood there, scarf tugged by the wind. Dorian wasn't just trying to take the company, he was trying to fracture it from within. Back at home, I collapsed into the armchair, the photo album untouched beside me. Instead, I reached for an old binder from the drawer, a thick folder filled with records, contracts, and the blueprint of a dream. I flipped through the pages, landing on the very first warehouse lease I'd ever signed. It had nearly bankrupted me, but I'd survived. I'd fought back then. I could fight now. The papers made a soft rustle as I laid them across the coffee table. The corners curled like they were holding secrets. My eyes drifted to my phone. The screen was dark, but its weight seemed to grow heavier in my palm. I wanted to call someone. Ellen, maybe. Or Pete again. But what could I say? That my son was tearing my life apart? I pressed the phone to my chest, whispering into the stillness of the room. Time to remind them who I am. The words were fragile, but they were real. I had stared at Ellen's number for too long. My thumb hovered, frozen. Morning light filtered through the blinds, making last night's courage feel far away. But Dorian wasn't hesitating. And neither could I. I hit call. "Malcolm," Ellen answered, her tone crisp and direct. "Ready to fight?" I let out a breath. The knot in my chest loosened. "I'm ready to talk. Can we meet?" An hour later, I was back behind the wheel. The 𝒆𝒅 skyline stretched beneath low clouds, dull and brooding. The drive to Ellen's office blurred past. Could I really take legal action against my own son? The same boy I once carried through thunderstorms and science fairs? But the image of that legal notice, those words, incompetence, mismanagement, burned through the sentiment. I parked, stepped into the cold wind, and crossed the street. My coat flapped behind me. Ellen's office was a small fortress of order. Books neatly stacked. The scent of old coffee lingering like a warm echo. She rose as I entered, her silver hair catching the light. "Sit," she said, motioning to the chair across from her desk. "I've been going over Dorian's claim. It's aggressive, but clumsy. There's room to push back." I sank into the chair, my hands clasped tight. "I don't want to destroy him, Ellen," I said, voice rough. "Not yet." Her expression softened, but her resolve didn't waver. "He's counting on you going soft," she replied. "We'll show him he miscalculated." She slid a folder toward me. Her pen tapped against the desk. "Start with the board. Reclaim their confidence. He's spreading doubt, we'll spread truth." Later, we walked to a nearby cafeteria, its windows fogged from the inside. The air smelled of burnt toast and stale coffee. Over chipped mugs, Ellen laid out the foundation, legal counters, strategy sessions, internal meetings. Even a small PR campaign. "This coffee is abysmal," she muttered, grimacing. "But our plan? That's solid gold." I cracked the smallest smile. The first one in days. "I'm listening," I said, leaning forward. Her calm confidence reached across the table like a hand in the dark. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt the ground beneath me, solid and waiting. Back in my car, I called Pete. The line crackled before his familiar voice cut through, rough around the edges. "Boss, some of the crew's starting to waver," he said. "Dorian's been working the phones. His talk is getting into people's heads." "Then I'll talk louder," I replied, gripping the wheel. "You still with me, Pete?" "Always," he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "That's enough for now." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a spiral notebook open, the lamp casting a circle of gold over the worn pages. I scrawled names, plans, and contingency steps in jagged handwriting. Each word was a move, each sentence a stone in the wall I was rebuilding. Ellen's strategy, Pete's loyalty, my own grit. It was enough to begin. I closed the notebook and leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. My car keys glinted beside the coffee cup, catching the light. I grabbed them. Outside in the driveway, I sat in the silence. The engine was off, but the tension hummed around me. The notebook rested in the passenger seat, its pages full of resistance. This is my move, I thought. And I wasn't finished. The office felt tenser than usual. The hum of the air conditioning was just loud enough to mask the murmurs and shifting feet. I stood at the head of the long conference table, facing 12 employees, some veterans, others newer but still loyal. They weren't just staff. They were the backbone. My family in a way Dorian never fully understood. Their eyes started, some toward the door, others down at their hands. His whispers had shaken the walls. But I wasn't here to lose anyone. "Folks," I said, my voice steady. "You know me. We built this place side by side. Every night shift, every hard decision, we did it together. And now someone wants to take it away." I paused, making sure I met each pair of eyes. "I say we don't let them." From the back of the room, Pete gave a slow nod, arms folded like a sentinel. A few others straightened in their seats. That softened. "I'm with you, boss," said Maribel, our sharpest dispatcher. The woman ran routes like a chessboard. A quiet murmur followed. Heads nodded. The tide had begun to shift. That afternoon, I drove out to the logistics yard on the outskirts of Worcester. The rain tapped steadily on my windshield. Forklifts groaned in the distance, weaving between crates in the yard, the air thick with diesel and the scent of metal. Word was Dorian had flipped Carradine Freight, one of our bigger clients, to his side. I needed proof. Inside the warehouse office, I dug through boxes of shipping logs under flickering lights. My flashlight cut through shadows until I found it, an addendum, half buried in a dusty pile. Sure enough, Carradine had breached contract terms for a side deal. Celeste's name was scribbled in the margins. My pulse kicked up. This was leverage. Back in the car, I dialed Carradine's CEO. "Jonas," I said, voice sharp, "I know about the deal you made with Celeste. Walk away from it, or this gets public." Every word. He stammered. "Give me a day, Malcolm. Please." "You've got 12 hours, I said, and hung up. The rain softened. I leaned back in the seat, adrenaline still thrumming. The steering wheel felt electric under my grip. Across town, Dorian stood in the glass-clad dining room of his minimalist fortress, a wine glass dangling from one hand when his phone rang. He answered. The color drained from his face. "He did what?" he hissed, his voice rising. The glass slammed onto the table, shattering. Wine pooled across the marble like a dark stain. Celeste, stretched out on the leather chaise, didn't flinch. "He's fighting back," she said calmly, her voice crisp. "We need to move faster." Dorian spun, his eyes wide. "He's a relic. He can't win this." She raised an eyebrow. "Then why are you yelling?" Back at the warehouse, I stood in the shadows near the loading dock, the contract still clutched in my hand. The rain had finally stopped, but the air hung heavy. Far off, the city's glow flickered behind the buildings. I tucked the papers into my coat. They felt like a blade. This was the first strike, sharp and clean. But it was only the beginning. I looked down at the slick asphalt where my reflection shimmered in a shallow puddle. Let them come. Ellen's office was warm with the scent of ink and paper and just enough coffee to calm my nerves. I sat across from her, the contract laid out like a weapon. Its creased edges curled with potential. She scanned the pages, her pen tapping lightly. "This is solid, Malcolm," she said, leaning back. "Carradine's already backing down. You've got the upper hand. But what's the next step?" I shifted in my seat, fingers brushing the chair's arm. "Something bigger," I said, voice low. "I'm not just defending what I built. I'm making sure they never get another shot at it." The words felt like a vow. I wasn't ready to share the full plan. "Not yet." She raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to keep it that close to the chest?" "No choice," I said, meeting her gaze. "They've got eyes everywhere." She nodded, then slid a folder across the desk. "Let's lock it down. I can draft a trust. Ironclad. We'll protect your assets. But you'll have to move fast." "Fast is all I've got left," I said, managing the hint of a smile. That evening, we sat in a quiet restaurant overlooking Lake Farewell, the water stirred by a breeze, the city lights rippling across its surface. Soft jazz played behind us, barely audible over the clinking of glasses and murmurs of nearby diners. Ellen leaned in, her voice slow. "I have someone you need to meet. He's discreet. Has the capital. He could secure the company's future." "You trust him?" I asked. "With this?" "Yes." I nodded. "Set it up. But no names, not yet. Not even to me." She didn't push. She understood. Secrecy was my armor now, and Dorian's reach was long. Back at my apartment, the fire crackled as I paced. The weight of the day pressed against my spine. I dialed a number I hadn't spoken aloud in years, one I'd never forgotten. The moment had come. The line clicked. A gravelly voice answered. "It's me," I said, my tone clipped. "Everything has to stay quiet. No leaks. No traces." "You have my word," the man replied. "We'll talk soon." The call ended. I exhaled, feeling the full weight of the plan settle over me like armor. I sank into a chair and pulled out a stack of old contracts from a drawer. My fingers traced the faded signatures. These were deals I had fought for, risks I'd taken when no one else would. Each one a brick in the empire Dorian thought he could just walk in and steal. I picked up my pen, the tip scratching across the paper like a heartbeat. Names, strategies, figures. Every line a step toward reclaiming what was mine. Later that night, Ellen's draft came through, an ironclad legal structure buried beneath layers of protection and dense legal language. I read it by firelight, each clause another wall shielding the company from the storm outside. It would work. It would make the business untouchable. But the cost wasn't just financial. I stood, holding the printed draft in my hand, and crossed to the window. ৱ𝒆𝒅 sprawled beneath me, a scatter of lights blinking like signals in the dark. Beyond the rooftops, Lake Garver churned, dark and endless. They don't know they've already lost, I thought, the words flickering like embers in my chest. The draft was heavy in my grip. A key to a door only I could open. Rain battered the office windows the next morning, streaking down like tears across glass. I sat at my desk, the screen of my phone glowing with a new message from Dorian. "We're not done. Expect papers tomorrow." I stared at the words until they blurred. Another lawsuit. This time, it accused me of financial misconduct. Every line felt like a fresh wound. I pushed the phone aside, my hands trembling, and turned back to the spreadsheet on my screen. Shipments, delivery routes, profit margins, all unraveling. My world coming undone piece by piece. Across town, in a house of glass and pretense, Dorian and Celeste stood in their sleek, sterile kitchen. Legal documents cluttered the marble counter like weapons. Dorian paced, his phone pressed to his ear. "File it now," he snapped. "I want him buried." He hung up, his eyes gleaming. Celeste leaned against the counter, lazily tracing the rim of her wine glass. "You're sure about this?" she asked. Her tone was soft, but her gaze was razor-sharp. "He's out of moves," Dorian said with a smirk. "He'll crack." My phone rang again, slicing through the quiet like a blade. Celeste. My stomach twisted as I answered. "Malcolm," she said, her voice smooth as satin. "We know about that old loan you never repaid. Messy history, isn't it? Would be a shame if it resurfaced now." I gripped the phone tighter, knuckles white. "Don't drag the past into this," I said. My voice stayed low even. Beneath it, a fire. "You've got nothing. Keep telling yourself that," she said lightly, and hung up. I couldn't stay in the office. The walls felt closer by the second. I grabbed my coat and drove to a nearby park. Rain soaked my shoulders as I walked, the gravel path slick and quiet. Soggy leaves clung to my shoes like ghosts. I stopped by a weathered bench, my breath fogging in the damp air. "Malcolm," a voice called from behind. I turned. Ellen stood under a black umbrella, her coat pulled tight, eyes watchful. "What are you doing out here?" I gave a tired smile, trying not to drown. She stepped beside me, extending the umbrella so we stood under it together. "Dorian's escalating," she said plainly. "But they're getting sloppy. That lawsuit? It's riddled with holes. We can counter." "I'm exhausted," Ellen, I admitted, the words slipping free. But I'm not finished. Good, she said. Because they're bluffing. We just have to move faster. Back at her office, the soft scent of chamomile tea filled the air. Ellen spread out a stack of papers across her desk. They're forging a narrative, she said, pointing at a highlighted report. Fake invoices. Altered email chains. It's reckless. I leaned in, my pulse steadying. Then we hit them with it. Expose the fraud. Ellen's eyes lit up. Now you're talking. I left her office with a folder tucked under my arm, evidence ready to burn through their entire game. Outside, the rain had slowed. The streets of 𝒆𝒅 shimmered under wet streetlights. The city felt electric alive. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Dorian. I didn't open it. Not yet. The folder in my hands was all the answer I needed. Later, back in my apartment, the fire crackled softly. The light danced across the coffee table, illuminating the screen of my phone. Dorian's message glowed. Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow. Let's make amends. 7 p.m. Our place. I read it twice. Maybe 3 times. Amends. After lawsuits. After threats. After everything. My lips curled into a quiet, bitter smile. They thought I'd fall for this? Still, curiosity tugged at me. What was their angle now? I dialed Ellen. The line rang once. They've invited me to dinner, I said. Thanksgiving. Say they want peace. Ellen laughed dryly. Peace? That's a wolf in a turkey costume. Meet me at the Roast and Amph, Birch. We need to talk. An hour later, I slid into a corner booth at our usual cafe. The scent of espresso and cinnamon wrapped around us, warm and familiar. Outside, holiday lights blinked along the window panes, a stark contrast to the tension coiling in my gut. Ellen sat across from me, her scarf draped neatly over the chair. It's a setup, she said without hesitation, stirring her latte. They'll smile, make you feel nostalgic. Then they'll throw papers in your face, probably with those doctored invoices. You ready for it? I leaned back, fingers drumming lightly on the cafe table. Let them think they're winning, I said. They don't realize I've already moved my pieces. Ellen's eyes narrowed, but a grin tugged at her lips. You're dangerous when you're smug. You know that? Learn from the best, I shot back. We both laughed. Just for a moment, the tension eased. Across the city, Dorian and Celeste stood in their pristine dining room. The table sat like a theater stage, crystal, silver, everything calculated. Dorian straightened a napkin with precision, his movements rigid. He'll sign, he said, certainty dripping from every word. One last push. He's done. Celeste, arranging the centerpiece, tilted her head thoughtfully. Don't rush it. He's more stubborn than you give him credit for. Keep him off balance. Dorian smirked. Oh, he will be. Back in my office, I sat at the desk where it had all begun. The city's light bled through the blinds, soft and golden. I opened the final file, the one I'd been crafting behind the curtain for weeks. Clauses, counters, signatures. Every detail aligned like gears in a lock. The company would be sold. Not to Dorian, not to vultures, but to someone I trusted. Someone who understood its legacy. It wouldn't be mine anymore, but it would survive. I hovered my pen over the dotted line. The ink flowed, quiet and smooth. A signature. A final move. The deal was done. He didn't know it yet, but his empire was already ash. I grabbed my phone and typed a reply. I'll be there. Looking forward to it. The words were a smile carved in ice. I stood, stretching, and my eyes landed on the old photo of Dorian from years ago. The frame was still cracked, a silent reminder of what I'd lost and what I still had left to protect. That night, I stood before the mirror, knotting my tie. The silk slid through my hands, sure and practiced. Tomorrow was their show, but I'd be the one directing it. I met my own gaze in the glass. The lines on my face weren't age, they were victories. They'll know soon enough. The tie tightened. My jaw set. It was time. The car's engine purred quietly as I sat outside their house. The 𝒂𝒏𝒄 suburbs were glazed with frost, the air cold and brittle. My phone buzzed. Stick to the plan. You've got this. I tucked it away, the message echoing in my chest. My tie felt like armor, my breath steady. The sale was sealed. The company was safe. I stepped out. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes as I walked toward the glowing facade. The house looked warm, welcoming. It was a lie. The door opened. "Dad," Dorian said, that too-wide smile pasted on. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Glad you made it. Happy Founder's Day." Celeste stood just behind him. Her dress shimmered like ice. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Malcolm," she said smoothly. "Come in. We've got a feast." I nodded once, a smile of my own stitched neatly across my face, and stepped into their trap. The dining room was a performance, polished silver, flickering candles, the scent of roasted meat heavy in the air. We sat. Small talk filled the silence like static. Every word rehearsed. Every glance calculated. Dorian raised his glass. To family, he said, syrupy and shallow. And moving forward together. I clinked glasses with him, our eyes locked. To moving forward, I echoed, the words dipped in irony he didn't catch. Midway through the meal, the front door opened. 2 men in suits stepped in, their briefcases snapping open like jaws. "Mr. Crow," one said, sliding a thick folder across the table, the pages inside neatly tabbed. "These documents will transfer ownership of the company to your son. Sign, and everything remains civil." Celeste leaned forward, her voice like velvet wrapped around a threat. "It's time, Malcolm. For everyone's sake." I picked up the folder. Its weight was familiar, just like the contracts I'd once signed in the early days, back when I had nothing but ambition and a leased truck. I flipped through the pages. Slowly, deliberately. Dorian watched me. His fork hovered midair, anticipation twitching at the corner of his mouth. Then I looked up and a laugh slipped out. Low, cold, unstoppable. "What's funny?" Dorian barked, voice cracking. I closed the folder and slid it back across the table like a poker hand I didn't need to play. "You're too late," I said, my voice steady and sharp. "I sold the company this morning." The silence hit like thunder. Celeste's hand trembled. Her wine glass swayed. Dorian's expression collapsed in real time, color draining from his face. "You're lying," he hissed, rising so fast his chair scraped loudly behind him. "Check the news tomorrow," I said, already on my feet. "It's done. The company's safe. You get nothing." One of the lawyers fumbled with his briefcase. Papers spilled onto the floor. Celeste's eyes burned. But she said nothing. Her silence was louder than any accusation. I turned toward the door. Every step felt lighter. The betrayal that had weighed on me for weeks finally slipped off my shoulders. Outside, the cold bit into my skin. The stars above were sharp and watching. I reached for my phone to call Ellen. My thumb hovered just above the screen when I heard the footsteps. Slow, heavy. I turned. Dorian stood beneath the porch light, breath rising in clouds, his figure shadowed and still. I didn't move. The parking lot stretched out behind him, slick with frost, glittering under the distant street lamps. Dorian's footsteps crunched behind me, his breath ragged in the frost-laced air. "You can't do this," he shouted, grabbing my arm. "That company was mine. You owed me." I turned slowly, my gaze locking onto his. His face was contorted, unrecognizable, no longer the boy I'd raised, but a man twisted by entitlement and desperation. "You lost," I said, my voice like steel. "The moment you betrayed me. You don't get to rewrite that." He stumbled back, his fists clenched at his sides. "I'll fight this," he spat. "You'll regret it." I shook my head, the smallest trace of pity crossing my face. "Good luck," I said, and walked to my car. The door slammed shut behind me, the sound final, like a vault closing. Inside their house, chaos erupted. Celeste stood in the wreckage of their once-perfect dinner. Plates pushed aside. A shattered wine glass glinting on the floor like broken promises. "You said he was weak," she hissed, her voice venom. Her eyes burned into Dorian as he paced, seething. "You pushed for the lawyers," he snapped, jabbing a finger into the air. "This was your strategy." She laughed, cold, sharp. "My fault? You're the one who thought you could bully him into submission." Their plans collapsed around them, turning to ash before their eyes. My phone rang as I drove through the snowy streets. Dorian's name flashed across the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. His voice crackled through the speaker. "Dad, please, let's talk." "I'm sorry." Then came Celeste. Her tone was softer, controlled. "Malcolm, we got carried away. Can we start over?" I didn't answer either one. Too late. I pulled into the lot outside Ellen's office. The city lay quiet under a new dusting of snow. Her building glowed with warmth. Inside, I sank into the familiar chair, the scent of tea grounding me. "Well?" Ellen asked, her eyes twinkling. "It's done," I said. A smile tugged at my lips. "The company's gone. Not to them. And they didn't take it well." She laughed, loud and free. "You crushed it, Malcolm. Proud of yourself?" I exhaled. The tension began to lift. "Not proud," I said, "but I'm free." Ellen slid a mug toward me, her expression softening. "You earned that freedom. Every bit of it." I took a sip. Warmth spread through me. My phone buzzed again, Dorian, then Celeste. I shut it off. The screen went black. A door shut tight. The fight was over. And I'd won. But the victory carried weight, lined with what could have been. Later, I stepped out of Ellen's office, tea still in hand. The city sparkled beneath the snowfall, every flake catching the light like fragments of possibility. I filled my lungs with the sharp, clean air. I thought of tomorrow not as a question, but as an open road. Each step crunched softly in the snow. Every footfall a promise, even if I wasn't sure what I was promising yet. The park nearby had turned to a winter painting, branches bare, dusted in white, holiday lights glowing between the trees. Ellen walked beside me, scarf wrapped tightly, her breath rising in gentle clouds. We'd left her office behind, but the weight of the night still lingered. "So," she said, her voice slight, "you did it. Sold the company. Outmaneuvered the vipers. What now?" I shoved my hands deeper into my coat pockets. "Something new," I said, eyes on the distant skyline. "Something mine." The words felt fragile, like the first green bud after a long, bitter frost. Dorian's face flickered across my mind. His childhood laugh. His fury last night. I let the ache pass through me. We ducked into a small cafe, its windows fogged, the air thick with cinnamon and hot cocoa. We slid into a corner booth. The wood beneath my palms was warm. Real. Ellen leaned forward, eyes bright. "You could start small," she offered. "A consultancy. Or something completely wild, open a vineyard in Larchstone. I'd back you." I chuckled, the sound loosening something deep inside. "You've done enough, Ellen." "More than enough." "Nonsense," she said, waving it off. "We're a team now. Just say the word." The idea sparked something, not the wildfire of the company I'd built, but a quieter flame. Study. Real. I sipped my drink and let myself imagine it. A new beginning. No shadows. No betrayals. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Back at my apartment, the silence was familiar. The creak of the old floorboards beneath me. The kind of quiet that didn't demand anything. I pulled the old photo album from the drawer, its leather worn and soft. I flipped to a page near the center, Dorian at 10, holding a model truck I'd given him, smiling like the world was his. I lingered, the memory sharp, his small hand in mine, his dreams I'd carried. But then I closed the album, carefully, and slid it back into the drawer. That chapter was over. I sat at my desk, a blank page in front of me. The pen moved slowly at first, then faster. A letter I'd never send. "I loved you, but you made your choice. I hope you find peace, but it won't be with me." My hand trembled, but I kept writing. Each sentence a release. Each word a door closed soft but firm. Later, I stood on the balcony with a mug of coffee warming my hands. The city stretched below, dusted in snow, its lights glittering with the quiet promise of tomorrows. I thought of the company safe now, its heart preserved. I thought of Ellen, her laughter, her unwavering strength. I thought of myself, 62, starting over. A smile tugged at my lips, small but real. This is just the beginning, I thought, the words warm against the chill. The coffee steamed in my hands, its heat grounding me as I leaned into the dawn. The city below shimmered with quiet motion, life moving on, and I was ready for whatever came next. End of story. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. Subscribe to keep this conversation going.